Today we are going to focus on what is a ratio and what is a rate. Your essential question is exactly that. What is a ratio and what is a rate? You would have had time on your pre-test to work on some of these vocabulary words, but please, some of us did not have that chance to get that finished. So please write these in your notebook as well. Ratio. Ratio is a comparison of two quantities of the same unit. That is bolded. It should be underlined, capitalized, highlighted. The same unit is the key to being a ratio. Again, as always, pause the screen so you have time to write this down as I'm going to continue moving forward. A rate. A rate is also a ratio. It's another kind of ratio, and it also compares two quantities, but a rate has different units. With a rate, you have different units. All right, let's move into some examples. When I write a ratio, I can write it in three different ways. If I was going to compare fruit, because again, ratios have the same unit, so these are all fruits, I can write it using the word to, as this first picture shows. Apples to bananas. I can write it in a fraction form, and I can write it in a form using a colon. So if I was going to show this with numbers, I would say 2 to 3, or I would say 2 to 3, written as a fraction, or I would write it with a colon, 2 to 3. These are three different ways that you can write the ratio. When we write ratios, you choose which way you want to write it, but remember to always put them in simplest form. What does simplest form mean? Another way to say simplest form is to say reduce. You want to reduce it. Remember, one of the forms of a ratio is a fraction, and so you would just be reducing that fraction. First of all, let's look at why these are ratios. Notice for this first problem, this is a ratio because I am comparing books. Again, at any point, feel free to pause this if you need to. But I am comparing books. I am comparing nonfiction books to total amount of books. And if I had to write this ratio, the original ratio would be 3 to 12, or 3 to 12, or the fraction 3 over 12. But I also need to write it in simplest form as the directions said, and that would be 1 over 4. 1 to 4, and 1/4. In case you're unsure on how I got that, if I was to just take the fraction form of 3 over 12, well, I know that 3 goes into 3 one time. If I was to divide this by 3 and divide that by 3, I would get 1 over 4. You may also be able to type the 3/12 into your calculator and have it reduce for you. Oftentimes, once you hit the enter button, it'll show it to you in reduced form. Note in this problem, this is a ratio because I'm comparing pizzas. I'm comparing pepperoni pizzas to the total amount of pizzas. And it's good to start paying attention to exactly what we're comparing. In this case, again, it is pepperonis to total pizzas. Go ahead and pause the video, solve this yourself, and come back and see what you got. Again, I have 16 compared to 24. I have 16 with the word to 24, and I have 16 over 24. However, on a test, I would have to mark that wrong because I need to make sure that I have it in the reduced form. So I know that 16 can be divided by 8, and so can 24. I know 16 divided by 8 is 2, 24 divided by 8 is 3. So when I write it in the final form, I want to write it as 2 over 3, 2 colon 3, or 2, the word 2 and 3. I'm going to reveal the next question. Go ahead, pause after you see it, solve it, and then start to see if you got the right answer. I am comparing marbles to marbles. I know that it would be 12 over 18, 12 colon 18, 12 to 18. However, just like the last problem, I need to make sure that it is simplified. And I know that at least 6 goes into both of these. And 6 goes into 12 2 times, and 6 goes into 18 3 times. So I'm going to have 2/3, 2 2 3, 2, the word 2, and 3. All of those are ratios because they are comparing similar units, books to books, pizzas to pizzas, marbles to marbles. We write it in simplest form for our final answer. Ratios. Write each of these ratios in simplest form. Go ahead and pause the screen and then find the answer when everyone is done. The answer to this first one is I'm comparing all shapes. And since it's all shapes, it's a ratio because it's the same units. I'm comparing the circles to the triangles. And so my answer is going to be 3 to 4 because I am writing the circles to triangles. Circles to triangles is 3 to 4. For this next one, the next one doesn't say. For the next one, go ahead and compare squares to total figures. Squares to total figures. Pause the screen or the video and then come back and see what you got. For squares to videos, I would have 2 squares. Oh my goodness, not squares to videos, squares to total figures. For squares, I would have 2 squares, and for total figures, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my answer here would be 2 to 7. If I wanted squares to pentagons, my answer would have been 2 to 5. So make sure you are focusing on the question being asked. And in this case, it was only squares to total figures. Let's try another one. You need to express the number of planes to cars. And so in this example, it tells us that there are 42 cars and 51 planes. Go ahead and pause and come back once you're done answering these questions. So the ratio from planes to cars, there are 51 planes, 42 cars. 51 planes, 42 cars. Some of you may not know this, but you do not turn this into an improper fraction. Or I'm sorry, you leave it as an improper. Don't turn it into a mixed number. Leave it the way that it is because I need to compare 2 numbers, 2 quantities. And if I had a whole number up front, if I tried to turn this into 1 and 9/42, that's not going to help me compare because I don't know where that 1 is going. So we need to leave it in this improper form of 51 over 42. I can compare it using words if I wanted to say 51 to 42. I could also write it as a fraction. If we wanted to write this as the ratio, we could also write it with the colon there, and then the fraction form. I'm not going to be very picky into which method you use. You will eventually start putting everything into fraction forms, especially when we start talking about unit rates and proportions. But at this point, it doesn't matter what method you use. The one thing that we missed here is reducing it. So we know that for all of these that we need to reduce it. So in this case, we can reduce this by 3. And you may want to use your calculator to help you see that, because not everybody would notice that. 51 divided by 3 is 17. Double checking in my head since I'm having such a rough day today, but 21, 2, 3. And then 42 divided by 3 is 14. Hopefully I did that right. Again, just having kind of a rough day, it seems. All right, next question. There are 16 girls and 14 boys. Find the ratio of each of the following. So I'm going to raise this up. Go ahead and hit pause, solve those 3, and then come back for the answers. All right, the first step that I like to do is highlight what I have, just so I am not confused and lost, because sometimes it'll tell you 16 girls and 14 boys. Sometimes it'll only tell you 16 girls and 30 kids in the class, and you have to find the 14 boys. So just make sure that you are very carefully reading the information they give you. I know right here that I have 16 girls. I know that the ratio of the total is going to be the girls plus the boys, and I know that 16 plus 14 is 30. So my total is 16 to 30. Again, I have to reduce. I'll start by 2's. I'm going to divide 16 by 2 to get 8. And I'm going to divide 30 by 2 to get 15. And I can leave it like that. Then I need to compare boys to girls. I look back and it tells me that my boys were 14 and my girls were 16. Again, I have to reduce that. I know that 2 goes into both of them, and that would become a 7, and this would become an 8. Last but not least, my boys were 14, and my total was 30. Again, I have to reduce that. So if I take them both and reduce it by 2, I'll get 7 to 15. Give yourself a nice pat on the back if you got those answers. What happens if they give it to me in different units? Make sure you write this down, because this is a common mistake that kids will make on a test. In that if it has different units, they don't pay attention to the proper steps that they should be taking. If they have different units, I must make them the same. Otherwise, it's not a ratio. It's something else. If it is given to me and they have different units, I must make it the same. Pause so everyone can write that in their notes. All right, example 1. It tells me to write a ratio. Ratio. I know that ratio is the same units. So as I am comparing here, minutes of exercise, hours of studying, I want to change these. Sorry for that. Just wanted to see how many problems we had. I want to change these to be the same units. So if this is 20 minutes and this other one is 1 hour, I want to change this 1 hour into minutes, or I could change the minutes into hours, but that's going to be a fraction, so I'll go the other way. And I'm going to say it's not 1 hour, but 1 hour is the same thing as 60 minutes. So now I am comparing 20 minutes of exercise to 60 minutes of studying. And that's going to give me 20 over 60, which is the same thing as 1 to 3. In order to be a ratio, I must have it in the same units. Ounces of butter to a pound of flour. ounces of butter to a pound of flour. 8 ounces, 1 pound of flour. I know that a pound is the same thing as 16 ounces. If you don't know that, there are different things you can do. In the back of your book, there is a conversion between many of the common conversions, such as ounces and flour, or pounds, sorry. And inside your planner in the back, there's also a conversion of some of these basics that you can use to help you. Then I just have to write the ratio, which would be 8 to 16, which is the same thing as 1/2. All right. Last but not least, I need to write a ratio for 10 inches to 2 feet. Again, I need these units to be the same. So that's inches, and this is feet. I know that there are 12 inches in 1 foot. And I have 2 feet. So that means it's 2 times 12, which is 24 inches. So this one will be 24 inches. And this is 10 inches. And when I compare it, I need to write it in the exact order they give me. I don't try to change it around or manipulate it unless the words say to do it differently. And then I need to reduce this. And if I divide both by 2, I get 5 over 12. You try. Go ahead, pause, solve these 2 questions, and then come back. All right, hopefully you noticed that in this first one, they were comparing 40 minutes to 2 hours. I know that I can convert that 1 hour equals 60 minutes. And since I have 2 hours, I need to take that 60 minutes times 2, and that's going to equal 120 minutes. So that tells me that I am comparing 40 minutes to 120 minutes. And then I'm going to write that as the fraction. I notice that 10 can go into both of them, giving me 4/12. And then I notice 4 can go into both of those, leaving me with 1/3. On the bottom, again, is one of those conversions that you'd have to use the back of your planner or the back of your book to find. We know that there are 4 quarts to a gallon. Some of you might remember Gallon Man. But there are 4 quarts to 1 gallon. I have 4 gallons here. So that means in order to get 4 of these, I need to multiply this by 4. So 4 times 4 would equal 16 quarts. 16 quarts in 4 gallons. So I can change this gallons to be 16 quarts. And it's being compared to 8 quarts. And then as I write that over its fraction, it's going to be 8 over 16, and I reduce it to make it 1/2. Last problem, go ahead and pause the screen, try it yourself, come back and see how you do. Notice I'm comparing feet to yards. I know, again, using that conversion in the back of my planner, that there are 3 feet in 1 yard. If I have 2 yards, it means I need to take this 3 feet times 2, and that equals 6 feet. So I can get rid of this 2 yards, and that is the same as 6 feet. Now I can write my ratio using 12 feet to 6 feet. Do not change the order. Write it the exact same way that you see it. Many would want to try and put the 6 on top here, but you don't do that. Another kind of snafu with ratios is that when I write this fraction, I want to write it as 2 over 1, not just a 2. I need to show that it's a ratio comparing 2 quantities. And if I only have the 2, I'm not showing that there's a second quantity there. All right. Pause the screen and see if you can solve these and come back for the answers. I'm going to move through these a little bit quicker now that you're back because you are probably getting the hang of it. This is going to be 15 to 21, which is the same as 5 to 7. This is going to be 21 to 15, which is the same as 7 to 5. They are two different ratios though, so don't think that you can write the same for each of those. For the girls to students in the class, it's going to be 21 to 36 students. And again, make sure you reduce that. And you should get 7 over 12. For the boys, it's 15 to 36, which is going to be 5 to 12. There was a question on your review test that a lot of students came up and asked about because they weren't sure. And it would say, like in this example, red, white, and black are there. And this says to compare red to blue. Well, if I needed to compare red to blue and there aren't any blue here, what would I write? Well, I would write, if there are 10 reds and no blues, then it would be 5 to 0 because there weren't any blues. So just make sure you keep that in mind. When I say not black or not red, I mean everything that is not black or not red. In this case, if there are 10 reds, 4 whites, and 22 total socks, and the red, white, and black are the only color, well then I know red is 10, white is 4, and black is all of the rest that bring me to a total of 22. So I know that the 14 socks that I have plus the black need to equal 22. Guess what? It's a one-step equation. I need to subtract the 14 from both sides in order to find that the black socks that I have are, what is that, 8? 8 socks will be the black. And then I can answer those questions down below. If I wanted not black, well then I know not black would be the red and the white. You go ahead and try this problem and then talk to your neighbor when the teacher gives you permission about what your answers are. And if you guys disagree on your answers, then figure out who's right and explain why you feel that you are right or you have the correct answer. Teach the other person the mistakes about the mistakes that they made. Once you are done with that, you may begin your homework. Make sure you are reading the directions carefully. And if it says a ratio, that you make sure it has the same units. And if it does not have the same units, make sure that you are converting them to be the same. All right, thank you for letting me finish that.